In this video, we'll pick up with the map we created with world indicators and specifically looking at CO2 emissions in different countries. And we'll learn how to create dual encoded maps, maps that convey multiple pieces of information. So here we've already created our filled map, and we're looking at the sum of CO2 emissions per country, right? And so here we have different countries, and the brown countries here mean that they're light emitters compared to the darker blue countries, which look like they're heavy emitters. But suppose I want to flip that. Blue is a cool color. So I want to show that, cool colors mean light emissions. The darker color here, this browner hue means, is associated more with, heat or something like that. So that might be what someone expects. So if we go around here and we edit our colors, what we want to do is actually take that, flip these around. So we click reverse and click OK. And there we go. So in this case, cooler colors. And what I want to do here is edit colors. Try that. Okay. And so here, what we see are there's two emitters who really stand out. So here we have countries in the darker blue, and they don't emit very much compared. And then you have these countries in very heavy brown, they emit quite a lot. And so that's that divergence. So we have this. Now, let's say we wanted to also see a couple of other things. So this shows total emissions per country. But for example, India's total emissions, right? 16 million, right? United States, 62.2 million, and the United States population is much smaller than India's. So the question is, China emits almost, the United States and China emit almost the same amount of CO2, 62.4 in China, 62.2 in the United States, yet China is way more populous. So what we need to ask ourselves is, what if we wanted the CO2 emissions per capita in these countries? So we just have to create a calculated field. So we can go here and go through our typical process for creating a calculated field, and we'll call it CO2 per capita. Not per capita, but per capita. And then we create our calculated field. So we want sum of how much CO2 per person. CO2 emissions divided by sum and population total. Calculation is valid. Okay, so now we have this. So what we'll do is first we need to create a dual axis map here. So we can take latitude, which is generated here, the latitude field generated, drag that to rows. You'll see it's created two maps. Okay. We go to the pill, just the same as any other dual axis chart. We click this down and go to dual axis. And so we've now made a combo axis chart. Now if we go to the generated 2, we'll remove the sum of CO2 emissions from the color shelf, and we'll add our new calculated field to the size shelf. And we get these dots. And so now we need to make these stand out in these colors. So we might go with that. Let's try to find something nice, maybe a little more opaque here, and then see if we can get a border and come in with the color again. There we go. And so what we want to do is we've influenced the color and now the size, because we want to have these noticeable. So what we're looking at here is how much CO2 is generated per person. And so this becomes also valuable because as we look at world indicators and we're looking at the global burden of CO2 emissions, we not only look for the countries that put out the most emissions, but we also look at how much is being emitted per person. And how do we change, the level of CO2 emissions? We look at the CO2 emissions per person and then go from there. We see that in Canada, right? It's, that CO2 per capita is, right, 0.01393. How about in the United States? 0.0165 in China. And so we're seeing that in some areas, the per capita emissions are quite high. So there's another way we can do this using a circle map. And so we can use size and color on a circle map as well. So let's try creating a circle map of this. So we'll go to country region and we'll go to CO2 emissions and show me and get our map. Okay. And so here we don't want this map, we want circle map. Okay. So now we're using circles to show CO2 emissions. And I probably want to change the color here. And I want to show more colors. Well, and I probably want to use a shade maybe, or maybe a darker primary color. To circle, we'll move the marks card from automatic to circle. Now let's take our CO2 per capita and put that in color. And then what we can do is the CO2 per capita, we can change the color, edit the colors, and we'll go here. Let's try red, white, blue, diverging. And we want it reversed. Okay. And so not only do we have the colors here showing the CO2 per capita, right? So the colors show the CO2 per capita. And let's change the color a bit. Let's try, how about just the orange? And there we go. I think that works better because the orange sort of shows the heat or the greater concentration with the darker hue. Okay. And then we also have the size. So the size of the circle shows the total emissions, right? So that circle, we can go to size and we can increase it as well. And so when it comes to total emissions, we can see that countries that emit quite a lot, and then by the hue, right, we can see in the saturation, we can see the countries that have heavy CO2 per capita. And so in these cases, we've managed to take a circle map and show these two different features. We can also try a diverging if we want. So if we didn't want to go with that, we could go with color again, edit the colors, and we can step the color. We can go, say, orange, blue, white, diverging. Let's reverse that. And you can even take it in a few steps, so it's like that. Click OK. And we see a little more variation. So we're trying to tell the story in these colors. The issue that you're going to have to play with the colors is making sure that your colors actually communicate the data in a meaningful way. And by keeping it all the same color, sometimes that doesn't work so well. So we'll want to try editing these colors a little bit more. And we can then try color here. Let's try that, advanced. And then we can say start there, and then center it a little differently. So you can also try the center a little differently. And we'll actually try the center at there we go. A little bit better. This is about 0.012. Click OK. So we've used the advanced. And so here we get a better sense of our big emitters and the biggest per capita ones. And so that's how you can create a dual coded circle map, and you don't need to create a dual axis chart here. So that's pretty helpful. So as you see, Tableau has a lot of advantages and pretty powerful geographic software. So you can do quite a lot and communicate quite a lot very rapidly.